Hello, everyone. I'm Stephen Patterson, the Executive Director of MedVR, a Boston-based nonprofit. We have a mission to convene the interdisciplinary community of medical XR innovators and to educate and to accelerate medical XR research and development. We have a very, very full schedule, so I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. But what I do want to mention is in 2 weeks we have a very interesting talk about a partnership between the UK and Uganda on surgical training using XR. It's on our website. I'll put the link in the chat so that you can register if you're interested. And I think it's a very interesting talk on how XR can be used globally to train surgeons. So on that, take a look at it, and if you find it interesting, please register. One housekeeping note: if you have questions, there's both a chat and a Q&A chat. Please use the Q&A chat. Our moderator will be checking the Q&A chat for your questions. If they're in the regular chat, they might not be seen. So I'd like to introduce our moderator, Lars Friedemann. Lars is a clinical neurologist at the University Hospital Heidelberg, as well as the director of Shift Medical, a medical XR conference every year, as well as operating a research lab in Heidelberg. He's a product of both the University of Heidelberg, Harvard, and MIT, and has spent a number of years as a postdoc in the US before returning. And on that note, I'll turn it over to you, Lars.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So it's a great honor to actually moderate this very exciting session. And probably for all of you who have been in the field of medical extended reality or spatial computing, if you want to call it like that now, you're probably very familiar with this very diverse and very exciting group of people here at the MIXR coalition, I would say. MIXR is a National Science Foundation supported joint effort between computer science and visualization experts at several universities, like the University of Maryland, College Park, and the medical schools at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and the University of Michigan, and also the University of Illinois. For me, it's quite exciting to see how computer science and medicine comes together, and how the various set of people find one topic so interesting that they actually form a coalition to move things forward into the clinic. And I've been in this field of medical XR since roughly 2014, and I was very excited to see that the National Science Foundation funded this very excellent approach of integrating and moving medical extended reality into the clinic. When we look at the history of medical XR here in Germany, but also in the US, it's not very novel. Just because you give it a fancy new name, it's not all of a sudden the new technology. But I think what's really novel and what's really exciting, and what you guys here are really pushing forward, is the integration into the clinical atmosphere. And not in a way that you push it by marketing or by very exciting news on LinkedIn or Twitter, but by really doing the hard part of researching also the integration path. So that's why I'm super excited to hear what you guys have been up to. I've seen a talk almost a year ago at the very initial time, and I found this very exciting. So yeah, I think let's start right away. So thank you very much for being here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lars. And it's a great honor and pleasure for me to kick off this meeting today by talking about our Center for Medical Innovations in Extended Reality. So on the next slide, let's first talk about what is the value proposition that we bring to the table. So all of us believe that the democratization of extended reality, which includes virtual reality, augmented reality, blended reality, mixed reality, all of these tools and technologies will be critical in improving human health across a wide variety of procedures, capabilities, training, and simulations. And so we would like to be the go-to place who helps diffuse the use of XR throughout the world. Already, there are a number of areas in which the 4 universities, along with our industry partners and the government partners, are leaders in the design, development, and deployment of medical XR, and we would like to continue that momentum and also take it further into the training of the next generation workforce. We would like this workforce to be talented. We would like this workforce to be recruitment ready for our industry partners and beyond. And we would also like this workforce to be diverse. As you have mentioned, Lars, one of the most exciting things about this center is that we are bringing together computer scientists, engineers, healthcare providers, industry, and the government agencies, all with the singular purpose of improving patient population health, as well as advancing technologies for improvement of the human condition. So how are we going to do this? On the next slide, we talk about our driving applications and our capabilities. So on the left are driving applications, and we believe firmly that all research should be motivated and to the service of driving applications. It's much more effective and powerful if we have the end in mind when we begin on any particular project. So here, the driving applications for our center are clinical applications. How can we enable clinicians to be able to use XR applications in their everyday practice? We are also deeply committed to the use of XR for medical education and training, and we'll talk about this as we go through the other projects. One of the key partners in this effort, in fact, one of the partners who helped us all come together was the FDA. And it is very important as we engage and advance the medical technologies to be keeping in mind the regulatory standards that will be in place to enable easier and smoother adoption of XR throughout the science, medicine, and of course, the healthcare communities. And finally, it's very important for us to be able to broaden the diverse participation for XR technologies. One of the nicest things we find about XR is that through the use of avatars, we could be of any race, gender, age, demographic that we choose to be. And it offers us in a very real way, a very level playing field, and in both simulation, training, practice of healthcare and its assistant technologies. Now, to advance these driving applications among the 4 universities that we'll be hearing from today, there are a number of core capabilities that we have. We'll be talking about the medical scenario acquisitions. We'll be talking about the AI, machine learning, predictive modeling. We'll be talking about the immersive telepresence using 5G, 6G, and other wireless and wired telecommunication technologies. It's also very important for us as we advance these to always keep in the forefront of our mind the human factors and the usability of our tools and technologies. And finally, we are also advancing new methodologies for imaging and displays for use in these XR technologies. So now let's talk about who we are. So I am Amitabh Varshney. I am a professor of computer science and dean of the College of Computer, Math, and Natural Sciences at the University of Maryland, College Park. I'll now turn over to my colleagues. Let's start with Sarah. If you could please introduce.
Hello, I'm Sarah Murthy. I'm a professor of surgery at University of Maryland, Baltimore. This is an honor. I'm glad to be here.
Hi, my name is Rishi Reddy. I happen to be a thoracic surgeon at the University of Michigan. Also excited to be here and to talk about our program.
Hello, this is Irfan Ahmed. I'm an assistant dean for research at the Carlin, Illinois College of Medicine, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I'm very excited to be on the panel today.
And I also wanted to give a shout out to our managing director. Barbara, would you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Barbara Braun. I'm the managing director for MIXR. It's fantastic to be here.
So thank you so much. And this has really been a unique honor and a pleasure to work with this really gifted and talented team for all these years. So now let's talk about who are our partners, our industry and government partners. So right now, the current members are the US Food and Drug Administration, Sony, Cook Advanced Technologies, Microsoft Mediview, and the United States Air Force. We are also working very closely, and we hope to soon be able to recruit Cleveland Clinic, Edera, Google, and Barco. And I certainly hope that there will be many others among the audience today who will be able to recruit to our center. So now let me talk about, wearing my dean's hat, let me talk about how good we are at the University of Maryland. So as with all other rankings, we love the rankings, which rank us high. And so if you go to the csrankings.org and you select Applied AI, Virtual Augmented Reality, and Bioinformatics, we are ranked number 2 in the nation. And it's not just these rankings, but also the strength of our faculty and our students and the amazing cutting edge research that they do every day that makes us so proud of being here at the University of Maryland, College Park. In terms of the capabilities, I mentioned earlier that we are working on the medical scenario acquisition. So now let me show you how we are doing that. We have built the world's, we believe, the largest volumetric capture studio. This is the 300 camera holo camera facility. And it has cameras aligned all over from all the directions on all the walls and on the ceiling. And it allows us to carry out a very high accuracy real-time acquisition. One of the important components in any kind of realistic simulation and training is to be able to have a high quality, high fidelity cinematic version of the event so that we could learn from the fine nuances of the body language, micro expressions on somebody's face, and be able to immerse ourselves as if we are actually present. Right now, we are working on technologies that would be able to compress and decompress this sheer large amount of data from all of these 300 cameras that are capturing data at 4K resolution, almost 30 frames a second. And we are using some of these neural machine learning codecs to compress, stream, and decompress this data. We recently presented this at the IEEE Virtual Reality Symposium, and you'll be hearing from us about more of these technologies as we capture more of these true-to-life medical scenarios that can be then used for simulation and training. So the next slide, we also wanted to talk about some of the other advances we have made. So in a first of its kind study, we showed that there is a 8.8% improvement in the recall of information that is learned, that people are able to recall when they're exposed to it in a virtual reality headset as compared to a desktop-only environment. This was, we believe, the first study of its kind to show a systematic advantage of using virtual environments. In another study, we showed how EEG-based measures can be used to quantify and characterize the level of vaccine-related cyber sickness. Vaccine-related cyber sickness, just to remind everybody, is the cyber sickness that is caused when your inner ear system is telling your body that your body is still. However, your visual stimuli are telling the body that it is moving. This often happens in virtual reality scenarios where a person is standing still, but they are seeing a scene that is rapidly changing because of a wide variety of other factors. And this, we believed, was one of the factors for cyber sickness, and this study confirmed it. And not only that, it showed us how to quantify it. Up until the study, the only way to quantify this was to use simulator sickness questionnaires that could only be administered before or after the study. So they gave you 1 point in the whole measurement scenario and not from a moment to moment. Since we can now capture and characterize cyber sickness from one moment to another moment, we believe we are opening the doors to now figure out ways and measures on how to mitigate cyber sickness in XR-related environments. I will now turn over to my brilliant colleague, Dr. Sarah Murthy.
Thanks, Amitabh. It's a tough act to follow. I was just going to spend a few minutes talking about how foundational and important I think XR is to the future of medicine across what all of us clinicians do. It can fundamentally change how we train our fellows and residents. I think XR therapeutics, especially around rehabilitation and pain relief, have huge potential in my practice as a surgeon and a critical care intensivist. Also, very excitingly, I think XR can be the next generation for how we do procedures, how image-guided procedures are performed by combining different data sets and giving that to the eye line to the person actually doing the procedures. My pre-XR and my other passion is in point-of-care ultrasound and in using cardiac visualization to take better care of really sick patients. And the ability to combine different data streams directly into your eyesight as you're taking care of them or as you're doing procedures, I think will make us all better doctors. I also think immersive, primarily virtual reality right now, to sort of transport the patient to a different place when some of these procedures are being done has the potential to make the procedures themselves much better tolerated. And has the potential to provide a non-opioid, really safe method to provide pain relief. And then training, I think that was fascinating to me that the next talk that this group is giving is on using telemedicine and VR to train people in the developing world. So I think that across the board, XR has the potential to foundationally change all of what we do for a living. The way I see this coming to be and the way these things can kind of link together is if we really start in simulation and training, and that doesn't require FDA clearance, that's something that can be done throughout the world. And as soon as our medical students are putting on these headsets and are understanding how awesome they are, they're going to start demanding it in their clinical practices. So I think an investment in training is actually also an investment in XR technology for procedure performance, because it's how we're going to make physicians really comfortable with these devices. So specifically, I work at Shock Trauma. We are a high volume trauma center. It's within the University of Maryland. We're in Baltimore. We see 7,000 patients a year. We train a wide variety of surgeons, intensivists, anesthesiologists from the military, from across the world, especially from the US. We also train first responders. We are ideally situated for any kind of research that involves XR for bedside procedures, operative procedures, or for training. Next slide, please, Barbara. We've done a couple of projects looking at XR. Both of these projects are really for bedside procedures. So the upper slide is EVD placement, which I'm sure Lars is very familiar with. The way in which we put these catheters into the brain is done exactly the same way that it was 100 and some years ago. A neurosurgeon literally blindly drills a hole in the skull and sticks a giant straw into the deep ventricles of the brain. And even though all these patients have been imaged before with a CAT scan, all of them have been imaged with a CAT scan, the neurosurgeons are essentially doing this procedure blind. They are remembering the CAT scan and they are mentally projecting it onto the patient. And there's a lot of reasons why that's problematic. And this particular procedure has many, many complications associated with it. Of note, it is not done in an operating room. It's done outside of an operating room. And a lot of very risky things are done outside of operating rooms. And so as we think about novel places to put XR, I know there's a lot of energy in the operating room, which is great, but the operating room is a highly resourced place with excellent outcomes. So some of these places outside of the operating room where we're doing dangerous, risky things maybe are a good place to start with XR. This picture beneath it is somebody intubating. So right now, when we put a breathing tube in somebody's throat, often you're looking away. First of all, you may just be looking at a camera at the bottom of the actual laryngoscope or looking away at that kind of postage stamp monitor. And so I think that the ability to see these sort of live video streams while you're doing procedures could really change care. We found a number of complications. These are bright light situations. Things look different when they're projected. So this whole group, it's been really awesome to kind of see what happens when you actually put these procedures in clinical situations and where the problems are and how to troubleshoot them. It's been really fun for me to work with this group. Next slide. Oh, Rishi, you're up.
So these couple of slides just talk about the University of Michigan, and at least within our medical school and our health system, what are some of our capabilities are as we participate in the MIXR program. But I want to reiterate, I think, what Dr. Murthy was talking about, and that this technology, we believe, will change how we train, how we teach both students and residents, not just in surgery, but I think overall in procedural care and even beyond that with cognitive training in different arenas. We can move to the next slide. So, and again, this is just kind of more about what we have at the University of Michigan. I think one of the things, and there have been some questions right now, I think in the chat, right now we've done some of our work with the HoloLens 2 and from Microsoft. The VR platform is varied in terms of different options, but our goal is really to be specific hardware and software agnostic. Our goal is really to prove, I think, proof of concept and develop both guidelines and standards, if we can, for the use of AR and VR across healthcare. You know, one of the big challenges along those lines that we've all seen has been the challenges in terms of getting equipment approved within the healthcare systems. That is one of our goals, our key goals is, you know, can we develop school universities can agree to that will simplify and streamline that process. So that's definitely been a challenge for us, at least in our institution, and I believe for most of us in healthcare and in education, it has been a real challenge. I think we can go to the next slide. I don't know if I have anything else, Barbara, on from our institution. I'll defer to Irfan going forward.
I wanted to slide in to make a point that we have three medical universities actively involved in this program. So it makes it relatively easy for us to do multi-center studies, which is important when you're talking about recruiting for numbers for research studies. So say if you want to show benefit for teaching a surgical procedure, it would be University of Maryland, Michigan, and Illinois, potentially all recruiting into these studies. So we can get to more trainees earlier.
And I'll just add, there was a comment, I think, in the Q&A about how to get involved. We are looking for industry partners. And so that is our goal is to partner with industry in developing these guidelines, developing these research projects that show validation of this technology in healthcare. So I would reach out to Barbara, who is the heart of our team.
Okay, so should I go then? Yeah, okay, Rishi, thanks, and Amitabh, thanks for leading the discussion. Thanks, Lars Riedman and Steve Patterson, for putting this together. Hello, everyone. Thanks to MedVR and MIXR leadership for inviting me to be on the panel. Our lead PI at Illinois, Dean Marcone, site director, was on travel and could not make it today. Being the newest member of the MIXR, I would take a little few minutes to give you a backdrop of the college itself. The Illinois College of Medicine, some of you may have followed it. The University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign is the world's first engineering-based medical school, established in 2015. And its curriculum is built at the intersection of engineering and medicine, with most courses designed by a team comprising of a basic scientist, a clinician, and an engineer. The curriculum infuses basic sciences, clinical sciences, engineering, innovation, and medical humanities in all the 4 years. So a high value is placed on patient-centered care, systems-based delivery, innovation and research, and clinical exposure. So Cardinal College of Medicine recently revised this problem-based learning curriculum in the first year of medical school to include XR training, scenarios, and holographic simulated patients to enhance diagnostic skills and treatment decision-making. XR's increased immersion, realism, improve retention overall user experience to provide a more effective platform for training of the learners. And it also breaks down the disparities. So now rural and under-resourced institutions can have access to the same level of instruction. XR-based teleconsulting is being piloted currently at Carl, Illinois, so that local specialists can consult with ER resources across the Rural Health Alliance covering Central and Southern Illinois. In terms of federal funding, the UIUC is the top funded NSF-funded campus in the country and has been for a number of years. The Jump Simulation Center, the Healthcare Engineering Systems Center, the Immersive Mayo Clinic and Illinois Alliance, and then CSA with 3 supercomputers are at the high level AI, machine learning, and natural language processing, and EMR integration, cybersecurity resources. The Jump simulation has the mission of training a new type of doctor, and it has got a number of resource simulation resources, including the VR mannequins, task trainers. Similarly, with the Healthcare Engineering System Center, as I mentioned, it's engineering. We are an engineering-based medical school, so we have it's based in engineering, provides clinical immersion to collaboration between engineers and physicians. The goal is to use his expertise in broad areas of simulation. One of the recent add-ons we had from a campus funding is a Center for Immersive Computing, and that talks about to catalyze the creation of end-to-end full system deployments for a few application domains, including healthcare, and that will serve as a research test beds. We have an ongoing partnership with Mayo Clinic Alliance for technology-based healthcare, and Mayo also is a partner to this MIXR that we are bringing to the table with patient-centric innovative research. And finally, the NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Application, is a hub for this transdisciplinary research and digital scholarship to address research grant challenges. We have embarked on a $10 million effort referred to as Brown Dog, to develop software to manage and make sense of vast amounts of digital data. So the team members comprise of, as Amitabh mentioned earlier, they're not only from clinicians, but also computer science, engineering, bioengineering, and my micronanotechnology labs and NCSA folks, along with a number of others from mechanical engineering and the like, including communications. So our collaboration of MIXR with FDA will ensure the safety and effective, innovative clinical solutions. And MediView, a global leader, was added to the college's training opportunity, where students, faculty, and clinicians have the opportunity to be the first integrators. Among the projects that I'll quickly mention are enabling rich XR experiences with low latency and low power XR systems from Sarita in computer science. We have applied paths, mixed reality application from brain injuries, which is also concussions, to induce a wide variety of neurocognitive impairments. And the long-term goal is to have a paradigm of interoperable concussion diagnostics. Fully automated segmentation from clinical imaging to VR XR, led by Brad Sutton Imaging and collaborator, the physician Matt Bremlett at OSF Healthcare, to develop a suite of classification of segmentation and algorithms to automatically, without manual use, segment and labeled 3D structures. The project focuses on leveraging new interfaces for medical imaging, machine learning that create straightforward pathways. We have a neurological exam task trainers led by Saul Wexler in mechanical engineering, XR in robotic telemedicine, again for XR augmentation of telerobotic interfaces that provide 3D assistance. And one of the interesting ones is, again, healing healthcare disparities among BIPOC patients through virtual reality cultural competence training. And that's led by our communications faculty, Sherry Thompson, that addresses healthcare disparities and inadequate healthcare. So we look forward to working closely with industry to understand their needs and to co-develop a compelling project. We have assembled a forum of all interested Illinois faculty and students who are able to constructively contribute to the mission of MIXR, working with partnering campuses in Maryland and Michigan. And then we at Illinois are currently working on establishing a global consortium of engineering-based medical schools for broader and global impact on healthcare. Thank you. Sorry I took longer.
No, that was great, Irfan. Thanks to all my colleagues for sharing what the partners are bringing to this. I'd like to just jump in here and share how these partnerships converge in the context of the IUCRC program. The IUCRCs occupy quite an unusual and powerful research space between the fundamental research of academia and the competitive research of the industrial sector. This pre-competitive space allows for use-inspired, jointly funded foundational research with non-exclusive IP access and the goal of building trusted relationships based on delivery of universal value. We note that our industry members are actually guiding the direction of this research through their own active involvement. They're voting on projects. They're mentoring our interns, mentoring our student interns on these projects. The IUCRCs are pulling together government agencies, academia, and industry with the point of driving innovation, fostering high-impact research, and training a skilled workforce. IUCRC lifetimes are typically 15 years, funded by NSF in 3 phases of 5 years each. And a lifespan like that allows a center like MIXR to have a significant directive and lasting impact. In particular, we have a series of value propositions for our members. In particular, we note that every year more than 2,000 students are engaging in IUCRCs nationwide. And that gives them on-the-job training for careers in the private sector. Ultimately, about 30% of these student researchers end up hired by the member companies. There are a host of other value propositions as well, including de-risking research and development by sharing risks of early development across multiple collaborators. You're able to lower research costs through access to facilities, infrastructure, and human capital. There's a higher return on your investment for jointly funded projects, and that allows members to better leverage your research funds. We also note that the IUCRC program at NSF has a strict overhead limit of 10%. So again, your money is doing much more actual research work. You also have access to the burgeoning network that we're creating in XR. I alluded to this earlier. You have access to royalty-free, non-exclusive licenses on intellectual property. And the last thing I'd really like to add is that NSF has confirmed its commitment to the future of XR by funding MIXR. We're the only center whose mission is focused on this technology. So we really want to emphasize here that NSF's vote of confidence is in both us as a center and in the industry as a whole. So with that, I'm going to share what some of our current and upcoming projects are. Amitabh, would you like to speak to this one?
Absolutely. So the first project that we are working on, this is with our industry mentor Sony and with FDA, is to assess how cyber sickness can be characterized in the presence of the divergence accommodation mismatch. So we showed you that there is a high correlation between cyber sickness that is experienced and vection, And here we are looking at the vergence accommodation mismatch. So just to tell everyone, cyber sickness is one of the big challenges that is facing the widespread adoption of XR technologies. Almost a third of the people who use XR are afflicted by it. And what we are driven by is to make the use of XR be as comfortable as your use of tablets, or laptops, or cell phones, or smartphones. So how do we do that? Well, we need to characterize and mitigate cyber sickness. And one of the factors is the vergence accommodation mismatch. So what this means is that in a regular life, when you look at something which is close by, your eyes swivel and your lenses squish in your eyes to focus and see it at the same time. However, in the current generation of XR technologies, for most of the commercially available headsets, your focus is at a fixed distance. However, the disparity between the two eyes changes based on how near and far the object is. So this is a work on characterizing it. Our initial results are very promising, and we are conducting a very systematic, thorough study to characterize this in a careful way so that it could be used broadly. And we are using EEG 64 unipolar channels to characterize this. So let's go to the next project. This one is an evaluation of markerless registration. Sarah, you want to talk about this?
So I know everybody in this crowd knows this already, but for either simulation or procedural guidance, you need to be able to fuse the holographic imaging or the medical data and actual real instruments. And this will answer some of the problems with haptic feedback. So in this case, we're talking about a training scenario for something called ECMO cannulation, which means inserting these really big, huge catheters into veins and arteries. And there's a tactile piece to that. There's a pushing and a pulling that you will know you cannot get from just a hologram. So when we train people on them, we use these specialized simulators that allow you to push into an actual object. The problem with developing a XR experience combined with the simulated project is you can't say have the ultrasound probe move and press onto the hologram if you can't track the actual instruments that we're using. So this project was developed to use video-based tracking, so not electromagnetic. The Amitabh's team did the actual tracking. So if there's questions about the tracking, I'll defer to him. But this is how you can actually capture the big catheter that we put into the veins, how you can actually capture the ultrasound probe itself and merge together the sort of 3D holograms that we are familiar with XR with the tracking of actual devices. You can make an incredibly high fidelity haptic feedback learning environment in its first iteration based on just video cameras doing the tracking and obviously software technology in the headset. And also that would lead into better procedural performance. So this is an example of simulation being the breeding ground for procedural uses for XR.
So the last thing we wanted to bring up was just projects that we have coming up this year. Sarah, you can speak to the first one really briefly if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously my passion is about procedures, I guess. But so this study is trying to understand when you make changes in the lag and latency primarily. So the lag would be from when an ultrasound image shows change to when it actually shows change on the headset. Or the lag is when you're moving something, the latency is that difference in showing the actual imaging. So in this case, we've developed a test bed where we can change the lag and latency, and then we'll have people doing breast biopsies and time how those changes are assessed, how those changes actually affect procedure performance. We picked breast biopsy not because I'm so passionately interested in breast biopsies, although they are very important, but because that procedure itself, we can modify and change so that we can find changes related to the changes in the XR display.
Thanks, Sarah. The simulation platform from Illinois, Irfan, did you want to speak to that briefly?
You're muted, Irfan.
Sorry. So repeat the question, please.
We're just looking at the collaborative simulation
Oh,
platform.
yeah. Sorry. So we are working toward developing a uniform platform across the campuses and working with the Jump Simulation Center in terms of identifying the platform so that we can develop these AR and VR training accordingly. At this current stage, we are identifying graduate students who will be working on this project. I have not made a lot of headway in terms of identifying the student, but we will be going into that details in the next few months.
I can take
Thanks.
Michigan, Barbara, if you want.
Okay, great. Yes, Reese had to step away. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, and just to make a comment on the collaborative simulation project at Illinois, this would allow us to collaborate together within XR, and to share courses. As everybody on this call probably knows, it's really very difficult to be or to be in different VR environments in different parts of the country. So that's part of what that is. The Michigan project, the integration project, Rishi mentioned a little bit in his talk about Michigan. Whether you're talking about the actual medical centers themselves or the medical schools, each center and each medical school has different rules around the technology that can come in and out and behind the firewalls. This creates a huge implementation problem from the moment in which a clinician might want an XR technology. It's going to be an additional at least 6 months, if not more, to get that technology behind the hospital firewalls. They're even within a hospital, you're dealing with patient data and HIPAA. It's very complicated. It's slightly less complicated when you're talking about medical schools and medical school training, but there's a whole other set of implementation hurdles. So this is starting the process of understanding what those requirements are at Michigan, at Maryland, and at Illinois, at the medical centers, and starting to sort of the process of developing a sort of national consensus and probably, hopefully, some clarity on what should be the implementation of these devices in a medical center and also medical schools.
Yeah, if I may add to Sarah's comments. So we have been, as part of the U.S. Air Force, who's a partner institution to MIXR and others have identified this to be a topic of interest, and similarly others into developing a uniform platform, and we at CIMED will be engaging with other campuses to undertake that activity.
Thanks. Amitabh, did you want to take the last one?
Yeah, the last project I would like to just briefly mention is we have talked about now, how cyber sickness can be caused because of vection. We have talked about how it could be caused because of the versus accommodation mismatch. And in addition, we are now going to be looking at how latency can also cause cyber sickness and how latency and these vection and versus accommodation, how do they all come and interact with each other? So that would be the project for this coming year.
I think that's all we have for slides. We're happy to open it up to our moderator.
Wow, very, very impressive. Thank you very much for this insight. I made a couple of notes, and there are also quite a lot of questions which we can answer or try to answer step by step. One thing which I find most interesting about your approach is that you really are tackling fundamental questions, something like markerless tracking and cyber sickness. And when you look at the media out there, Apple, Meta, HoloLens, Microsoft, it looks like all of these problems are already solved. When you look at a couple of other institutions, primarily in the United States, it also looks like XR is here. It's right there. You can just get it off the shelf, get it into your operation room, and just use it instead of opioids use it instead of some Da Vinci robot. Just go ahead, move fast, and don't break things. I see a huge discrepancy between what you are telling us, a 15 years horizon of research, which I find very realistic, and the current view on things at other, sometimes even academic institutions. So how can this actually happen? Like, are you, and I am very much in the same boat like you guys, are we too critical? Are we too careful? Or are others just moving too fast? And what do you think, Amitabh?
So thank you, Lars. This is such a good question. I think it's only when we start working with real users for real driving applications that we start to uncover some of the differences, some of the distance between what is reality and what is a hope and an aspiration at this time. And I think one of the things I really credit my close collaborators, Dr. Sira Murthy, and Dr. Rishi and Irfan and others is basically making us as computer scientists, realize that the frontiers are still unexplored in a lot of these application areas that typically a lot of people would sweep under the carpet and say, well, this is done. And it's not done. It's still there. And when you have a medical professional standing up on their feet, working through a procedure for hours on end, how can we make the cognitive load less and the physical fatigue be manageable to allow them to conduct the study effectively and in a efficacious manner. So on that, I would also like to maybe perhaps turn over to my medical collaborators for their views on this, if that sounds good.
Yeah, I think, Lars, you said something important, which was move fast and don't break things. And I think some of the solution behind what people imagine XR could be and what XR currently is lies in this piece of looking at simulation first. So long as we're talking about simulation and simulated patients and understanding what happens when you actually use this technology in a real life situation, if you're in a simulation scenario, your chance of really hurting somebody is pretty low. So I think this is both an opportunity for us to create better training tools and also an opportunity for us to understand the realities of these devices in a very lifelike scenario before we're actually using them on patients. So for example, when we did the study on intubation with XR, with Amitabh's team, and they came up to Maryland, projecting a video stream onto a HoloLens in the bright light of an ICU makes that camera image almost go completely away. So there were a lot of things we had to do to actually be able to see that image at all. And we can only figure that out in a simulation scenario. So I think this center is important for addressing what you just said. That problem, the difference between, and I'm really hoping I don't offend anybody, but the difference between kind of Silicon Valley break things, when it hits medicine, we saw with Theranos, we saw with, there's just sort of scandal after scandal, which involves what happens when you take a marketer and a computer scientist's vision of what a technology can do and try to put it in medicine before actually seeing it. Because I think that medicine's a little bit of a brick wall is not quite the right word, but getting into medicine for real reasons is harder than getting into other markets. So I think you're dead on about the difference between the dream of what XR can be and will be and what it currently is at this moment. And that's part of where we're trying to define what needs to change to get to that vision, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And the thing, like when you look at what is needed in an operation room, it's close to 100% accuracy and precision. Something what I really liked about your approach is that, when you look at markerless tracking, has been going on for 20 years of research, and we are still not there yet. Something, Sarah, what you just mentioned, like the visual aspect of a HoloLens. It's just not suitable. Like we tried it here as well in an operation room with all the reflections, all of the light. It's extremely difficult. And I think what's very important, and this is also why I like in the horizon very much of 15 years, because it almost feels like you have to step back a little bit and ask yourself, like, what is really needed to make solid progress. And I think this is something what is very exciting about what you guys are doing. And it also shows your dedication to this, because it really will take 15 years. It's not a quick win, and there are no low-hanging fruits. And even the simulation part here at the Heidelberg University, we also have done quite a lot of simulations. And even that is difficult, very difficult, like scaling it up, like training 2 people, showing your grandma how nice VR is, or your children how much fun they can have. That's easy. But then bring it into a curriculum, have a standardized assessment of all of these students. It's extremely difficult. So even there are few low-hanging fruits, but it's very worth pursuing, I think.
I have 2 additional thoughts. One of the reasons why we're pursuing the Department of Defense so thoroughly, and also the Air Force, is they already have XR technology built into headsets for completely other applications. So they're putting a fair amount into the hardware for very similar problems that they're trying to solve. And also, I think there's a lot of close hope with VR for pain and VR for rehabilitation. I think I've had great experiences with patients using it. I think that's close. And opioids are so problematic. So I think there are these, as part of what we're trying to do in MIXR 2 is find the low-hanging fruit, like kind of find the channel in that gets the headsets on people, while we build in handle these other challenges, which are not trivial. They're not. Getting an XR display to really work in an emergency room or in an ICU or in an operating room, we need different hardware, I think. But anyway.
Yeah, so one question from the audience, actually not just one question, quite a lot of questions. Like, what kind of hardware are you using right now? You said, like everybody in the field, by the way, says they want to be hardware agnostic. But what are you using right now? You need to start somewhere. Like, is this something you can disclose, or is this something you want to keep for you for now?
I mean, Amitabh, I can answer for all of the things we're doing that are more procedure-based, more XR than VR. We're using the HoloLens. That's what we have. That's who our affiliate member is. Like, so we use the HoloLens for that because it's what we have. For VR, we also use kind of whatever we have on deck. I think for that, we're using whatever hardware we like physically have. I'll turn it over to Amitabh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we are using a wide variety of headsets. So some of the studies we have done are with the HoloLens, but we are also doing some of these other studies which are not XR related on these Oculus headsets, HTC Vive headsets, and on the new ones we are also doing on the Apple Vision Pro. We have just gotten one. We have also looked at Magic Leap, both the first generation, which had multiple focal planes, and the second generation. So, and another thing which I have to say, I mean, there are some other comparative studies we are doing together with FDA, where we are looking at how anti-aliasing, how the eccentricity, which is the angle from the center of the view, changes based on the display brightness non-uniformity. So there's a wide variety of these things we are doing. And there's a very nice paper that has recently been published with Ryan Beams as the first author, which talks about the evaluation challenges for the application of extended reality devices in medicine. I don't know if there's a way for me to post it. It'll be very good to see, because I think what it says is how in a center like ours, while we would like to be somewhat device agnostic, at the end of the day, we have to be very specific about the devices, and it's not easy comparing a lot of these human factors components across a range of display devices. So it's a challenge, but it's also one that we are prepared to meet and advance the field in. Let me see if I can post it. It's a very anyway. So I'll continue seeing if it's easy to. I can only post the host and panelists. Looks like. Anyway,
I can. I actually. Ryan gave a couple of talks at our European small contribution to this field in Heidelberg. And I think, Stephen, you're also well familiar with Ryan Beam's paper. And it's very, very interesting. And also the depth is very, and it's very encouraging that people go into such a depth, because I think what's very difficult is to just take a headset off the rack, off the shelf from Best Buy or in Germany MediaMarkt, and then take it into the hospital. And this actually brings us to one more question, which is the medical device regulation. Both in the United States as well as in the European Union, requires a tremendous amount of work when it comes to quality assurance, management, all of this. And very often, by the time a company or a research institution has figured out a pathway to use a headset with a specific display for a specific use case, the company has decided that this is now the old version. So there will be no support. Like we have seen this with a Meta Quest 1. We will very soon see this with a HoloLens. So how do we move forward? I think this is not something very specific to medical extended reality, but what's your take on this? Like how do you develop a medical device in an ever-changing field where displays radically change? We have seen this in particular in the VR space with pancake lenses, which are completely different. Like what's your take on this?
That's such a good question, Lars. I mean, I have to tell you. So as an example, let's just go back for a moment to the markerless tracking. One of the things that we did not anticipate is how difficult it would be to do segmentation under different lighting conditions. So in the everyday world, we do our segmentation quite easily in the regular consumer grade cameras. And then you take it into a setting with really bright lights. And most of the camera's dynamic ranges are not sufficient to capture that high dynamic range that is now underneath these bright lights. So one of the things which we are hoping we can do to also ease the task of the framing of the regulatory standards is to define the capabilities for procedures, and then have the device manufacturers look at what are the capabilities of their sensors, of their displays, of their gyroscopes, accelerometers, and others for tracking, and see if there is a way to have a level of detachment from product to product to product to more from product to capabilities and capabilities to procedures. So that we are hoping could allow a more easier way. Same thing would hold true for, let's say, luminance non-uniformities. Again, another project that the FDA is working on. So how critical are luminance non-uniformities across the field of view for medical professionals to carry out a particular procedure? So I think this would really help. Otherwise, there are so many devices coming out on the market at such a rapid pace. it's so hard to characterize each device for each procedure under different conditions. It's very hard.
I think, Lars, you're asking about two different things, right? You're asking about the FDA regulators and their goals, and then you're asking also something about the hardware manufacturer and their sort of constantly updating devices. So we keep buying new devices, and the cost of that if you have to get through the FDA for one device. And so I think the FDA is very interested in this. This is their entire reason for participating. They want to be clear on their recommendations. They want to make this easier than it is currently. The reason for doing this is so companies can get through faster, and so that this is part of why Sony is also working with us, so that hardware manufacturers can understand on the front end what the requirements from the regulatory agencies are going to be. But this piece you're asking, which is a industry question, I would refer back to Apple and Microsoft, because they're going to need slightly different business models for medical applications. They just are. So what works to sell more iPhones is not necessarily what's going to work to sell more iPros, to doctors. And I don't know what industry's answer is going to be. Medicine is not their primary goal, I don't think, right now. So we're sort of being wagged by their tail. But I think that's a good question for the hardware manufacturers, because I get why they need to keep updating models so people keep buying new ones, but that's going to be a problem for medical applications.
Yeah, totally agree, Sarah. That's a big issue, by the way, because the medical field is extremely expensive to develop solutions for. And a lot of companies, also from the gaming industry, who develop software, are not very well familiar with clinical trials, with the accuracies, with the usability requirements in healthcare, all of this. So there's a lot of education needed. And there was one very critical question from Jonathan Kamel, and he is asking, like, what is the reason why all of the companies who are currently like position themselves as a medical extended reality centered company, why are they not that profitable? Why do they have so much difficulties getting into the market? And do you guys have any take on that? Like, what's holding them back? Like you mentioned, there's a lot of hope and a lot of signal in the data that VR could be used for pain management. If that's the case, why are these companies not being profitable?
Oh, Amitabh, that sounds like a question for you.
So I think this is a really important, difficult question. So I think part of the challenge is the technology itself. I mean, I've been working in this area since the mid-90s. And at that time, the problem was the tracking could not be integrated into the headset. So we needed to have these external trackers, which would create this whole big, first of all, the cost was very high, but also it was very hard to set up the whole environment. So now that, what Oculus did, which was fantastic, was they integrated the tracking into the headset. And because of the miniaturization of accelerometers, gyroscopes, and others, which were, pretty amazing. The displays have been steadily improving. The processing form factor in the form of GPUs and other processing has come down. The challenges right now are the power consumptions on these devices are very high. We are still haven't quite gotten to a holographic rendering. What I mean by that is the displays are still more or less at 1 or 2 or 3, focal length, distances. We can't freely focus. And this is one of the things that I was just, typing out in question to this very, in response to this very thoughtful question from John Rice about where are the differences between what we perceive in reality versus what we perceive in a virtual world. And to me, the difference, all of our efforts in modeling these devices are a way for us to be able to sustain the illusion and map these devices as well as possible to what the human perceptual system is. Anytime the devices are not able to fully map that, do that mapping, we have a break of this illusion of reality. So if the frame rates are not high enough, if the divergence accommodation mismatch is there, if there's a lag, if there's a jitter, if there's a non-uniformity of luminance, if the field of view is not large enough, any of these, if the resolution is not, resolution though I have to say is almost getting there, but even so, if the weight of the device is noticeable for long periods. So these are all the places where this difference between how we go about through this millennia of evolution of our human bodies versus these additional strap-ons that we are now using to mediate our interaction with the world around us creates that difference. And I think so some of it is definitely technological. The other part, of course, this is market-driven. And there the challenge is being good enough for a particular use. So if entertainment is the primary market, are these devices good enough for entertainment? And for how long? If 20 minutes is what we are targeting, and these devices are good enough for 20 minutes, then it becomes very hard from a market, from a dollars and cents point of view to justify investing into a device that a surgeon can wear for 3 hours. And I think that's much more of a marketplace reality situation.
I think the headsets that could be used are, I mean, from medical terminology are still pretty new. Like if something's $3,000 each device, and now we're talking about people buying them, for an individual surgeon buys them, and then also a hospital has to buy them. Like we're just getting to price points and to devices that we could even start really looking at for medical applications. So on the one hand, Amitabh has been doing this since the 90s. On the other hand, we're talking about maybe 5 years. I don't know, Amitabh, how long has the price point been close enough that you could actually even think about using it for, say, pain? And even for pain, if you look at applied VR, I think that's $2,000. Like the cost is still really astronomical per patient use for some of these things. That will come down. But I think that the time that we've had hardware we could use is actually not that long, even though people have been talking about XR forever, or not forever, but for decades.
Very, very good take on this. Like, there's actually a follow-up question on this. Like when you said the price is still very high, what are the companies actually paid for? Like what is the mechanism of action? And what is actually paid for? Like, do you pay companies for the R&D getting to the therapeutical voxel? Or are you paying companies who offer pain management tools because of their distribution channels? Like what is mechanism of action in VR, and how should you reimburse companies for their development? When you look at, for example, pharmaceutical companies developing a specific drug, a new antibody or anything like this, you know exactly that 99% of all of their initial candidate proteins or antibodies which they develop land up in the trash. And then one will survive, and the manufacturing of that part is still quite expensive because you need to have a clean room, you need to have a constant quality assurance of this, and then eventually you need to have it in a sterile way to inject it into human body. Like when I look at some of their applications, which companies claim can be as good as, let's say, morphine. or significantly reduce the consumption of morphine? Like, what is the mechanism? And why do we have to pay 2,000 euros for this? If you on YouTube very often just see video games style of the 80s or sometimes 90s, which any indie developer can produce. Like, what is it? Like, what is the mechanism of action? What shall we pay for?
Well, that is a big question, isn't it? So we have Cleveland Clinic, which is a big insurance company and medical center, as one of our future board members. How we pay for things and what we pay for is they are stakeholders. And I think that's one of the hurdles that answers your previous question, which is we don't know how to pay for these things. We don't know what we should be charging for these things. We don't know how companies can recover their R&D costs. I fundamentally very much agree with you about VR for pain in particular, where I mean, that's a whole other discussion, but I think how we're going to pay for these things is one of the things that has to be figured out for this to go mainstream. It is also not as important for simulation. And it's part of why going in first with simulation, where these things are easier, just makes some sense. But for it to have a real therapeutic effect that is paid for by insurance companies in the US, those are big questions that I don't think we have the answers to.
So this is why I think it's so important to have a coalition like MIXR, because on one hand, you need to think about all of the signs, cyber, sickness, of markerless tracking, but at the same time, you need to develop business models, which also work. And I think this is why what you guys are doing is a fantastic use case here, to actually have a horizon of 15 plus years, have a constant funding commitment, which I think is very important. Because you don't want to write summaries of your work every 6 months and then ask for money every 9 months, and then you get the jitters because you don't know if you get the money again, and then there is no constant development. There's always like, what's next? Like publish a paper, publish a new device, convince the reviewers that it's good invested money. I think here it's a very interesting combination of having a very long-term vision, but also the funding, and also somebody with like deep pockets who believes in what you guys are doing. I think it's very, very important. So we talked a lot. I mean, we could go on and go on. And I think one question, I think maybe Irfan, to you. Like what about AI and XR? Like, where is AI and extended reality? Like, it's everywhere. Like where it's in marketing, it's in healthcare, it's in large language models, it's in AGI. We soon have robots taking care of everything. This is the other question, by the way, if we want to like spin this idea, do we really need to have a human interface using XR, or can we just go straight to a robot, AI driven, of course?
So there are several avenues that we are engaged in terms of AI, machine learning, in terms of disease patterns and the like. And with that, I mentioned about the Mayo Illinois Alliance, and that is particularly working on some of these aspects with the National Center for Supercomputing Application, the NCSA. So, but then in the robotics space that you mentioned, so that again is where both the hard robotics and the soft robotics, I mean, there is a role that AI is going to be playing. And so whether you want to see something as yet is still not there, to my understanding, but the progress is being made on projects that are able to detect these disease patterns and the like. So, and with the challenge and all of this, as we know, that is the natural language processing models that exist, which is a plethora of data sets that not only includes the word and text, but also imaging data and videos and audios and the like, and bringing them all together and making sense of it is where we are currently. But we do have the computational horsepower to actually run these and to make sense of these. And so the algorithmic part continues to be developed and then interface it with the XR tools is the next challenge that we are working in. But we could see that in the pedagogical space for student learning and next generation workforce training. And then that would apply, broadly speaking, to other domains. I mean, beyond the healthcare and the training of the trainers and the like. And so we see those opportunities coming through in the next few years.
I think when you think about how AI gets to the workforce who's doing any kind of procedure, medical procedure, but also even repairing something at the space station or a firefighter, like XR is how you're going to get AI to somebody doing something, because it's how it's going to get displayed and how it's going to interact with the person. Even the sort of Iron Man visualization of Jarvis, like that's basically XR. So I think XR is how AI and machine learning become part of procedure-based workforces. But I mean, this is why there's a 15-year, it's a lot of computation. But I think that for machine learning to get to somebody trying to do something, whether it's medical or non-medical, then XR seems to me to be how that will happen in the future.
So guys, I have to jump off, but this has been a lovely discussion. I wish I could be a part of it for longer.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Amita, thanks a lot for your time and being here. It was a lovely discussion. And Stephen, maybe you want to close the session today. We could have gone on for another hour.
I would love this to continue, likewise, but I'm surprised having two clinicians here that we haven't had to cut it short anyway. So, but this has been a great talk. So often with new technologies, the first part of the research and development is defining hundreds of problems, and then later on they distill down to 10 or 12 fundamental scientific questions, and at that point we start to accelerate the research, and this is what we're seeing being done right here, which I think is incredibly important, and why why MedVR appreciates our panelists today to give us a perspective on this, and it will change how medicine and healthcare is delivered, and we'll see it happen in our lifetimes, but perhaps not next year. But a lot of exciting research. The connection with you, Lars, I think is really important. I spend a day a week going through research, and the research in this field is absolutely global. Absolutely global. There isn't, if you were to pick one region, you would only find, even if it was the most populated region, you'd only find half of the research there, and the other half is elsewhere. So having this communication is great, and I appreciate your coming on board to to moderate, and I hope we make more of these connections. So on that note, I want to thank MIXR. This talk will be up in about a week on our website if you want to review it again. And thank you, Lars, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks a lot. Let's keep
Thank
in touch.
you. Thank you, Lars and
Bye-bye.
Ewan, Barbara.